Good evening and welcome to the PI show. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight, the main topic we're going to talk about are injuries which arise in the course of working, and that's a topic that concerns most people. Most people work at some point in time, and we're here to discuss the different issues that arise out of that situation. I'm here with Tony Carbone,
Good evening,
who
viewers.
is a PI lawyer of 25 years experience.
Bit more than that now.
Okay, so every year it creeps up. But before we do that, we're going to ask Tony about what's been in the news recently about personal injuries.
Harry, it's the big story that came out last week was this, or recently, was the arthritis drug Vioxx. Slater and Gordon ran that case for quite a few. There was about 330 or more Vioxx users in Australia that were on the back of this class action, and one fellow by the name of Peterson won his case in the federal court. Now, there was a lot of strings to their bow, so to speak, but I understand it was litigated under the Trade Practices Act, which is a federal legislation. But I think you know a bit more about.
Well, it has started off as a class action. I think the background was that a number of American lawyers sued Merck, the drug company in America, and they invented and promoted Vioxx as a drug which would help arthritis.
Yep.
So they did clinical tests along the way, and in 2000 they found that some clinical tests they found, on balance, increased the risk of heart attacks.
It actually doubled the risk.
Well, that's ultimately what the court found here. So I think the clinical tests were a bit uncertain, and Merck, surprise, surprise, put a positive gloss
Spin on the whole thing.
And they downplayed the risk and said, look, there is some risk, but it is a wonderful drug.
Well, Harry,
they promoted the drug amongst doctors, and I think in America they eventually came to the conclusion that it was risky, and it was taken off the market in 2004.
why did they settle the claim in the States for 44,000 users, and they settled for just under $5 billion?
Well, lots of factors go into settling claims, Tony. And the American lawyers sued Merck, and they came to an out-of-court settlement in, I think, 2006. And they settled on a global figure. And, the newspaper reports say there's 44,000 people in America.
That's right.
Who settled now.
And in Australia, it's only about 500. And actually, their exposure in Australia would only be about 230 million.
Well, we're not quite sure, but
Yep.
what happened is they decided, I think, to fight the overseas claimants.
Okay.
So there's different legal tests, and in Melbourne, in Victoria, they decided to fight the claims, and the case took a number of months to hear in 2009, and in March 2010, Judge Jessup of the Federal Court came out with a judgment in favour of one person, who is Mr Peterson, and he said that Mr Peterson in fact suffered a heart attack because of Vioxx. That's the first step. So I don't think that's an easy thing to prove.
No, it's a pretty
Secondly, that the drug wasn't suitable for its purpose because there were dangerous side effects.
It wasn't of measurable qualities, the words he used, and wasn't fit for the purpose of arthritic relief.
And then Mr Peterson was awarded $287,000.
Which is made up of what, Harry? How would
probably mostly general damages and a little bit for economic loss. He's 58 years and he can't work.
Okay, he had about 7 years of working life left if he retired at 65.
So the case ran for a number of months. There was a lot of evidence called from America, a lot of discovery of documents which came out in the course of the proceeding. The judgment, Tony, is 500 pages long. If anyone wants to read it, it'll be available on the Federal Court website. But it's interesting that the day the judgment came out, the spokesman for Merck said, we are appealing this judgment.
Okay. And this brings us back to that issue we discussed recently about deep pocket. These companies with
The
deep
role of a
pockets-
defendant lawyer, and there's deep pockets
Deep pocket
litigation.
litigation.
This case was fought very vigorously by defendant lawyers, as they're entitled to, but it's called deep pocket litigation, where no expense is spared to defend the
defend the
claim,
claim.
and as they're entitled to. But they've appealed. The appeal goes to the full federal court, 3 judges. If they lose there, you anticipate the appeal
Go to
might
High
go to
Court.
the High Court.
Yep.
So this case might take 2 to 3 years to resolve if the defendant and their lawyers keep extending the litigation.
It's hard to understand for the average person in the street. It's hard to understand why they'd settle something for $5 billion in the States out of court, and they wouldn't try and settle something that's probably worth $300 million here.
Yeah, well, I think there was an anticipation that they would, and something's gone wrong, or the company's decided, or
Wasn't
the
it fair to-
lawyers have decided to fight the case. I'm surprised, as I think the plaintiff law firm was surprised that they actually ran the case.
Harry, isn't it fair to say that in the States, if the plaintiff succeeded, there's every prospect that the damages could have been 3 times that?
That is a
And so
real
they've,
risk.
they've done the economics in it, and they've said, look, let's settle it out of court because
That is
it's
a real
bit
risk.
dangerous.
Yeah. So
Yeah, the upside's not as great, so
Yeah.
they figured we might as well fight them and see what happens.
in Australia.
In Australia,
Yep.
yep.
So look, it's in the news, and it's something that is interesting because there's people have been injured, and there's been some deaths also arising from the side effects of Vioxx. I think there was a big breast implant case again, similar, where there was a settlement in America,
And then they fought it in Australia.
and it was more difficult in Australia to fight the case, and ultimately was settled out of court.
Well, the lawyers for Mr. Peterson were very apprehensive about this case. They always had an expectation it'd settle. Never happened. So,
and they ran it, and
ran it, yeah.
it's run in the first instance successfully, but
Yes.
we think there's a bit of mileage to go in this case. Now, after the break, we're coming back with some cases that are of interest about people who
course of employment injuries.
injured in the course of employment, all the different factual situations where people are injured, and the argument is it in the course of employment or outside
Well,
employment?
Harry, on that note, we've got to take it to a break, and so the viewers should stay there, keep watching, and we'll see you when
We're back after
when we
the
get
break.
back.
Thanks.